The sky was still black, the stars were still out, and dawn was nothing more than a thin red ribbon along the horizon when the sirens went off, wailing rudely across the vast army camp. As one man, the army of black warriors awoke. There were no dawdlers, no one dared to slumber beyond reveille. The desert rattled with the slap and clatter of 1,000 hands grabbing 1,000 rifles. The soldiers leaped to their feet and burst from their tents, dashing across the sand, lining up in long, even rows on the flat desert. They stood at attention, rifles ready, eyes straight ahead, primed for battle. Field Marshall Idi Nkromo was already awake and strutting about at the front of the camp, watching his army come to life. He was a heavy-set, marble-eyed man with medals and ribbons adorning his chest. Most were of his own design, and most he had awarded himself. He scowled. He glared. He growled orders to his lieutenants, his hand always on the gleaming saber that hung at his side. He nodded approvingly to himself. Yes, this would be the moment, the final engagement, the ultimate display of his power. After this day, his rule over the tiny African nation of Togwana would be complete and absolute. After this campaign across the desert, no one would dare to... He became distracted by a muttering, a buzzing among the troops, and Nkromo was displeased. Why were they not all standing rigid and silent? Hadn't enough soldiers been beaten or shot to enforce discipline? The light of dawn was just now revealing their faces, and they were staring anxiously toward the desert, exchanging worried glances with each other and whispering through the ranks. And Nkromo drew his saber and bellowed, "Order!" The soldiers stiffened at attention, but there was still a stirring, and their faces held wide-eyed fear. "Mobutu!" "Sir!" Mobutu, a younger, thinner man in a khaki uniform, came on the run. And Nkromo pointed his saber at his army. "Find out who's causing this disturbance, and drag them out to be shot." Mobutu didn't respond. And Nkromo shot a deadly glare his way, but Mobutu wasn't looking at him. The thin lieutenant and chief secretary was looking toward the desert, the same direction the army was looking. He appeared stunned, his mouth hanging open, his eyes wide with horror. "Mobutu!" Mobutu pointed toward the desert. "Sir, if you would look." And Nkromo never took advice. "Mobutu! Maintain order in the ranks." Then, as if it were his idea, he added, "I think I'd like to survey the desert." And Nkromo turned with a deliberate casualness and looked across the barren expanse rimmed on the north and south by towering rocky crags, just becoming visible in the light of dawn. The saber fell from his trembling hand and clattered on the stones and sand. Thunk! Jay Cooper, 14, strong, wiry, and sweating in the sun, swung a sledgehammer and drove the last wooden stake into the ground. Then he wound the end of a heavy rope around it and tightened it down with a few more whacks from the hammer. He had driven several stakes to hold the ropes tied around the base of a huge stone pillar etched with ancient relief carvings, hieroglyphics, and, near the top, the faces of Greek gods. The pillar was massive, at least 3 feet thick and 30 feet tall. It stood in the center of a vast excavation, the unearthing of what used to be an ancient Greek temple on a high bluff over the Mediterranean. Dangling like an acrobat by a rope and harness, Dr. Jacob Cooper struggled to tighten a loop of cable around the crown of the pillar, being careful not to mar the chiseled face of the Greek god Zeus. "Okay, Lila," he called. "More slack." Lila Cooper, 13, was perched on the ancient temple wall, her eyes alert and her long blonde hair tied back for safety.